now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, my mind, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grounds they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Neurodivergent News. We are so excited today. We have with us a phenomenal guest. He is a certified functional nutritionist, and some of you may be familiar with him from his own show here on K-Fred. I have with me today Chris Pratt, not the actor, but just as amazing. Chris, say hello.
Hey, Deanna, thank you so much. It's good to be with you today. And although I am not the actor, I was here first, so I claim the name.
Yeah, I can get down with that. So, certified functional nutritionist. You are the first one I've had on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So basically, it kind of means a lot of things. The certified part just means that I've gone through a formal course and a formal training, right?
Right.
By an accredited university. And then the functional nutrition, what that really speaks to is using nutrition in a functional way, right? So, in other words, using nutrition to help alleviate symptoms, to help, inflammation in the body, whatever the case may be. So, functional nutrition is about using food beyond the scope of just, I'm hungry, let's eat, right? But it's actually, I like to think of it as replacing medicine with food in a lot of ways. Now, I mean, of course, that's not always the perfect thing, but for the most part, it's using food in a very practical way to get the body to function correctly.
I would imagine it would also, you'd have to have a fairly deep understanding of what individual foods can do for you.
Yeah, it is, and there's so many foods, and people are so different. And I'll be honest, the biggest thing that I've learned through all my training is that there's not a one size fits all model. Like everyone is so unique and everyone is so different. And what works for one person with one condition may not work for another person with the same condition. So it's really about understanding the person and holistically looking at their body, their lifestyle, their stress levels, the environment that they live in. There are so many factors that affect our health. But at the end of the day, we can use food to create a good environment for our bodies so that we can do things like fight chronic illness or, prevent disease, that sort of thing.
Well, I know when you and I spoke previously, I had asked you, do you have any special knowledge about how the gut health and what we can eat can impact neurodivergence? I mean, there's lots of stereotypes out there. They talk about us with ADHD guzzling caffeine by the gallon, and it acts like a suppressant on us versus anybody else would be shaking and jittering and bouncing off the walls. But it's not just that, is it?
No, there's so much more. Okay, there's so much more. The interesting thing is most people don't realize that 90% of the chemicals in our body, like serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, all of those are built off amino acids. And amino acids come from the foods that we eat. So really and truly, our emotions, everything that's happening chemically in our body is originating in our gut. It really is like you are what you eat. We've heard that for years, but literally whatever you're ingesting is the only thing your body really has to work with to produce what's needed for homeostasis, which is complete balance. Right. And so that's where we're starting to see so many issues nowadays, not just in people who are, say, neurodivergent, but just in people, is because the things that we're putting in our bodies, sometimes our body doesn't even recognize it as food and it doesn't even know what to do with it. So instead of processing it and using it to create building blocks for our systems, it literally looks at it like toxins and waste. And then our body responds in an inflammatory way. So, it's important the things that we eat because those amino acids and how that works, it's going to start to build those emotional connections in our gut. And then our gut sends signals to our brain. One interesting thing, since we are talking a lot about neurodivergent people, is that 70% of all people that have been labeled with some sort of neurodivergent issue, they have some sort of gut imbalance or issue. Now, to me, like that's a major red flag, because I'm sorry.
I can believe it. I know how picky of eaters we are with textures and tastes and all sorts of different. I can believe we're unbalanced.
Yeah, and then the question becomes the things that you are eating, is it compounding to your sensitivities? Because you don't have that array of nutrients, the diverse microbiome. And so therefore, like your body is literally grasping all the time, trying to find what it needs. And that I can only imagine would begin to cause all kinds of chemical imbalances in your brain.
Well, I know one problem that we have is serotonin regulation. We have highs, we have lows, and it's almost unpredictable. Could that be something that could be solved with diet?
I do believe that in a lot of cases, absolutely. I personally believe, and I've seen it in my own life and in the people that I've worked with, diet almost moves everything in the right direction once you start getting the diet fixed. And again, what is the diet? Well, it really depends on the person. You know, I personally, I eat a plant-based a diet. That for me, that was what I chose to do. There are some people that just say like, I can't function that way, and maybe they can't. I am not someone who said, "Oh, if you're eating an animal product, you're going to be unhealthy." I'm not necessarily saying that. I will say you need to question the quality of animal product that you're eating, just like we've got to question the quality of plants that I'm eating. It all runs hand in hand. And the hard part is we're living, most people that I think that our audience goes to is Americans, and we are living in a really sick society. And I that's kind of a play on words because there's a whole lot of people who are doing things that are, in my opinion, very diabolical. And they're serving us things and marketing things that are not food and telling us they're food, and we're believing it.
You have a few.
And oh, sure. Like, let's take, for example, anything that has a dye in it.
Okay.
Okay. Like dyes are detrimental to the body because the body does not know what to do with them. They are toxins. And the reason is because they're chemicals. The dyes are petroleum based. We are literally eating petroleum based products whenever we eat that stuff.
Wait,
And
oil based?
yeah, absolutely, because that's where the money is.
That is outrageous.
It is. And the research is coming out now, and it's coming out boldly to show the correlation between dyes and the amount of dyes that kids eat and the level of issues that they're seeing, like ADHD and autism, for example. And the graphs are completely parallel. As the amount of dyes go up, the amount of incidents of ADHD, autism diagnoses go up. And so it's quite fascinating. And the scary part is these dyes are hidden in so many foods. Now, I personally, and in my family, we avoid ultra processed food at all cost.
Mhm.
Okay. And what I get, because there's processed food. So take something like a spaghetti noodle. Okay. Spaghetti doesn't grow out of the ground, right? But wheat does, or whatever the grain is that it's made out of, because now you can get like chickpea noodles and lentil noodles and all kinds of things, right? But then it's processed minimally in a way to put it in that form. Okay. So we will eat food like that. We try to eat as much whole food as possible. And when I mean whole food, I mean like literally like a stalk of broccoli, right? Something that doesn't have to have a label on it at all. Like you don't go to the store and find a label on your carrot, right? Because you know what it is. That's a carrot, right? They've added nothing. They've taken away nothing. It just came from the ground. But if you go into the center of the grocery store where there's boxes and cans and bottles, you're going to find a list of ingredients. And when you look on that list, first of all, if there's more than 2 or 3 ingredients, I don't even touch it. But then I'm going to make sure that those ingredients, they're things that I know what they are and I know where they come from, right? So if I'm going to look at my spaghetti noodle and it says whole durum wheat, okay, then this was wheat and they've processed it into spaghetti noodles. I get it, right? But when there's a laundry list of things and suddenly it's things that end with like "ide" or like all these acronyms, or we've got dyes and we've got numbers. Like what in the wonder, why are there a list of ingredients that are numbered? Like number 40, number 2? Like what does that mean? That's because these things are all synthetic. They've all been processed in a laboratory. They're not food. They're chemicals. They're chemicals that have been deemed safe to consume. But who deemed that? And how do we know for sure? Because a lot of these things haven't been around long enough for us to even know what they would do to our bodies.
I would be concerned just for the fact of if each of the individual chemicals has been deemed safe, what about when you start crossing them together because you add two products that they didn't test chemical A and chemical B, but now they're integrated?
Great example. Great example. And right now, nobody knows. Like that's a great example. That's a great question. And so, the scary thing is this stuff is packaged so beautifully in a way that makes it feel like it's good for us. Even like so-called health foods,
Mhm.
it's scary what's going on. So, if you walk the grocery store aisles, okay, like let's take, for example, the aisle with breakfast cereals.
Right.
My suggestion is that you make your own breakfast cereal using, rolled oats.
Okay.
Because whenever you buy oats, it just says rolled oats, or steel cut oats. And I have one ingredient here. It's straight from the plant. Okay. But what's happening is whenever you go and you get, say a box of your favorite little cartoon character cereal, right? It's all different colors. It has these pretty candies in it and marshmallows and all these other things, right? And if you look, you're going to see minimum 20 ingredients in that box. And I guarantee you, 15 of them you will have never heard of before. And the number two is probably sugar.
Yeah, almost every single one of them. Corn syrup of some sort is usually the second listed ingredient.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And see, what people don't realize is in order for food to have a longer shelf life so that it's not so perishable in a way, okay? And that's what we're talking about ultra processed foods. They have to take out the fiber because fiber is what causes food to go rancid. So whenever they take out the fiber, they've taken out almost all the nutrients and the flavor. So then they have to re-inject flavor back in, which is where all of our wonderful smorgasbord of chemicals comes in because then we flavor it chemically and texturize it chemically. I mean, think about it for a second. If you had, say flour and you took out all the fiber out of the flour, what are you left with? Not a lot. Right. So it doesn't have any structure. It doesn't have any taste. It doesn't have any texture. So then we have to create something in a laboratory to give it some sort of consistency that people will want to buy. This is the condition that we're currently seeing in the world of ultra processed food. And unfortunately, I would say that probably 80% of the food in a grocery store is ultra processed. I mean, that's just my number. I don't know a stat, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And again, like it's in the common things. Like, did you know that almost all pickles on the shelf have high fructose corn syrup in them?
I did, but we
Okay, so
so
right. And so here's the question. Why do pickles need sugar? Right? I mean,
not
like,
right pickles, they don't.
right. I mean, I don't ever sit down and eat a cucumber and pour sugar on it. That's awkward. And especially that it's been mixed with vinegar. Like, but people have grown accustomed to everything being saturated with sweet. And
Yes.
that was one of the things when I went plant-based and I also cut out all refined sugar and all added sugar. It was a wake-up call for me. I was the guy who used to make Italian food, right? I would make the spaghetti with the meat sauce and all this. And I was always told, oh, you've got to sprinkle some sugar in there to cut down the acid. I used to put sugar in my tomato sauce, and that is not uncommon at all. And it does make it taste nice. However, completely unnecessary. But whenever you go and you buy your favorite bottled or canned tomato sauce, I guarantee you they've added sugar to it.
Yeah, I think most of them have an average of 10 plus grams of added sugars.
Yeah, and then the astounding thing is, and this is very applicable to people that are neurodivergent because here's the thing, it's really applicable to all people because it doesn't matter if you're neurodivergent or not, you're a person and human bodies function the same way. We all have our idiosyncrasies and everybody's a little different, but the building blocks are all the same. And so the thing is, when it comes to added sugar, like a full grown adult male really should not be having more than maybe like 12 grams a day at the most, right? Children even less. And I was excited to speak with you because I spent most of my career as a teacher. And so, they have this really great program in the schools called, Breakfast in the Classroom. Okay, it's only great if you're not a teacher. It seems like a great idea until you're the teacher and you've got to clean up all the sticky hands and people spill milk all over the floor. And it's like, whose idea was this? Well, anyways, so in the morning, they bring you like an ice chest, one cold and one hot, and they'll have like breakfast food and then drinks and whatever. So you disperse it among the class. Any kid who wants to eat it can. I started keeping track on a daily basis of how much added sugar was in the food that they were eating because it's all packaged. So I just read it. The average day after the first meal of the day, if the kid ate what was provided, they would have already had over 20 grams of sugar in one meal.
I have to presume a lot of that was carbohydrates or in the juice.
No, no, no. This is all added sugar.
Just added, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yes, it is crazy. It is crazy.
That's just setting children up for failure.
And we wonder why they can't concentrate in school. And we wonder why they're wild and they don't behave. I have a pretty good idea, right? And that wasn't even counting if they brought their own breakfast and ate their own breakfast from home, too. I would have kids walk into my classroom in the first grade, sit down with a tub. I mean, like literally like a to go, like takeout home container, like that you would put like chicken parmesan in, right? Full of donut holes. They would eat that plus the school food plus drink a Fanta. I
Oh,
mean, that first meal of the day, they've probably had 60 grams of sugar, and I'm seeing it's unbelievable what's happening. And, that's kind of my wake up call to parents, right? Because not only are they not getting extremely quality food in the school, then I see parents sending kids to my classroom with stuff that's even worse. And I get it. It's convenient. You're on your way to work. You don't have time to make breakfast. So you go through the donut shop. But let me tell you something. In 20 years, when your kid has a chronic illness because you went to the donut shop once a week, it's not going to be worth it. It would have been better for them to not eat, honestly, just fasting.
so I know that I've been talking to a few people out of the UK here in the last few weeks, and we've been talking about some similar stuff, how they serve breakfast in the classrooms in a lot of their schools, but their food composition is dramatically different. If you take a box of Fruit Loops from the US and a box of Fruit Loops from the UK and put them side by side, the UK version actually looks bland.
Yes, you're exactly right. And that's because in the UK, most of the chemicals that we're using have been banned because they're so bad for human health.
So do you think that could be one explanation why neurodivergence is about half the occurrence rate over there as it is here?
Look, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, just say what it is. Yeah, there is no question about it, right?
Mhm.
If we are pumping children full of processed food and refined sugar and lacking them in the areas of fiber and micronutrients, they can't function properly.
They can't
They
even
just can't. You're exactly right. And then what's even worse is we're creating a culture who knows nothing about good nutrition, and they're going to repeat that with their children. And it's going to continue the cycle and it's going to get worse and worse. That's why I'm really on a mission to educate families to say, you have to understand what's going on. And you have to realize that food is your medicine or it's going to be your disease. And so you have to choose the right thing.
Do you think at this point, after 60, 70 years of integrating all of this into our food supply, it is possible to come back?
That's a good question. My heart wants to say yes, because it is possible. It would take the most amazing grassroots effort, and I think there are people leading the way. I see it happening, and now with social media becoming so powerful, we are starting to hear more and more. We are starting to learn more and more, and it's harder for us to be hoodwinked, if you will.
Mhm.
Okay? But really, the only way it's going to change is when people like me and people like you say, I'm not buying that stuff anymore. I'm just going to buy real food. And you know what? Whether or not it changes the system won't matter because it'll change us.
So we are talking about benefits, not just for neurodivergent individuals, but for entire families, neurotypicals. I mean, it's community mentality that we need to be changing.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, sure, I think there are some nuances with neurodivergent people. And I think that it's powerful to look at those things. I'm not opposed to that. But really, the problem we're facing is societal. It is not just the neurodivergent population, although we are seeing an increase in that population. And I believe that it is due in part in a lot of ways to our food supply.
Well, I mean, most of the research suggests that ND individuals are ND before birth. That usually by the time they're 3 to 6 months gestation, whatever imbalance has occurred in the brain has already occurred. We also know that most genetic, I can't think of the right word, um, incorrect genetic sequences, my brain is not functioning right now, are from the mother's diet, which is not to say it's mom's fault, but our food supply seems to be contributing to it at that very basic level.
Absolutely. And so if we're going to make the statement that, oh, basically you're born that way, then we have to take a look then what's happening prenatally, like what's happening in the womb, because people are people and we've been going along for years. And it wasn't until the advent of the Industrial Revolution and then followed by where we are now that this stuff even existed. I mean, like I'm not extremely old, won't mention it, but I'm not extremely old. And when I was a kid, I didn't know anyone that had ADHD. It wasn't even talked about. And I get it.
The kid I knew.
Yeah, things advance and we understand things better. And so we make more awareness. And I'm not opposed to any of that. But at the same time, it was just different 20 years ago. It was just different. And we've got to take a look and say, this is changing really fast. And for people with parents, I mean, for people with children or people with grandchildren, it should be alarming and it should be concerning because this is the society and this is the world that our kids are not only inheriting, but they're going to have to navigate it. And if this is where we are now, when they are adults, what will have been introduced by that point?
That is a very powerful message. I would like to shift gears though a little bit. I know you are a dad yourself. What practical tips would you have for families that would like to begin looking at options to start moving towards a healthier diet?
I love it. I love it. That's a fabulous question. So there are a lot of practical tips. I am the kind of person that's really all or nothing. So, like when we did it, we went cold turkey and everybody was kicking and screaming except for me. And a lot of them are still kicking and screaming, right? But I realize not everyone is probably going to jump in that way. So, the first step is this. If you could do anything, I would say let's start by saying we're not going to eat things with refined sugar. Okay, because by doing that, that's going to cut out a lot already. It just gets me focused on that one thing. Like I'm not going to eat high fructose corn syrup. I'm not going to eat like whenever it says like white sugar or whatever, like I'm going to sweeten things naturally with fruit, right? There are all kinds of great options. Like for example, stevia leaves. Okay. I'm not talking about the white powdery stuff in the grocery store,
I was about to
right?
say, that sounds like the opposite of what we need to do.
No. Go to Amazon, type in raw stevia leaves. Okay. They look like tea leaves. You can order them. They're not very expensive and they will last you a really long time. And instead, whatever you would put sugar in, get a pinch of it, crumble it up in your fingers and sprinkle it in your recipe or in your tea or whatever it is that you want that sweetness. It works wonders. There's also organic ground monk fruit. Again, not the stuff you buy in the store, because monk fruit in the store is a white powdery substance where they've taken extract and combine it with a whole bunch of fillers and it's chemically based, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual monk fruit that's been pulverized into a powder. Whenever you buy it, again, you can find it on Amazon. I'm not an affiliate, but you can buy it on Amazon and it looks almost like really fine grained sand. It's like a really beige, like light brown powder. We use that all the time. And these kinds of sweeteners, a little bit goes a really long way. So yeah, it doesn't have the same rush as table sugar, right? It is going to take some acclimating yourself. But once you get far enough away from that processed sugar and then you incorporate these things in, you stop craving the other and you're satisfied with this because it's natural. And the bad thing is this, we've convinced ourselves that so many things we eat are food and they are not. And I think one of the ways to help shift your mindset is to start, and this sounds drastic and some people may not want to do this, but this is what I did and it really helped me and my family. I just started labeling things that were chemically based as rat poison.
Oh my goodness.
And so whenever my kids would say, "Oh, can we have that powdered donut?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, look, that donut has been sprinkled with rat poison. So how much of it do you want?" "Oh, I don't want any of it." Okay, because you know what? The sugar on that donut is going to have the same effect as rat poison. It's just going to take longer.
Okay. So what
So
about honey? That's the one most people are going to come to naturally, and you didn't
sure.
mention.
Honey, yeah, I don't really eat honey. And it's not for any reason other than it's just not my favorite sweetener. So I didn't mention it, but I do think honey is great. I think it has tons of really great benefits and vitamins and minerals and things like that. So I'm all for honey. I'm also huge on date syrup and I'm also huge on maple syrup. I think those are all natural sweeteners. Of course, everything in moderation. Okay. We're not going to do like Buddy the Elf and just pour maple syrup all over everything, right? But in place of, to help you get a little bit of that sweet into, I know we're coming up in the holiday seasons and people are going to want to, bake and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it is going to take slightly different. It's going to taste slightly different, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It just means it's time for change.
I like that.
Yeah. But the bad thing is this: these are chemicals and you become addicted to them, just like you do drugs.
Right.
And so and it becomes this emotional attachment. It really is so much like drug addiction. Well, and they in fact say that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And I always say, yeah, because I know way more people addicted to sugar than I do to cocaine. So that being said, though, it really, you have to give your body some time to detox those emotions. Remember, we talked about the gut brain balance. And if that's all you know is that white powdery stuff, your gut microbiome is craving that because it's all it knows. One thing that's really helped me is this: your body craves what it knows. And if you start to teach your body what broccoli is, at some point you're going to wake up one day and say like, hey, I think for dinner I wouldn't mind some broccoli, because your body's going to go like, I missed that. I liked that. It just takes some time.
So start them young and start them early is the best practice.
Absolutely. We weren't perfect with our kids, and we're reaping some of those consequences now. The child that is the easiest for me food wise is my youngest, because as we progressed in life, we got better at this. My oldest is the worst. She's really picky and she's had the most time eating junk in her life, so we have to kind of really work hard to detox her. Where my middle daughter and my youngest, it's a little bit easier because they didn't have as much time with all the junk. But it really is about shifting that mindset and starting. If you can never introduce your kids to refined sugar, that is the smartest thing you can ever do. If I have a first time parent listening, like, don't ever give your kids any high fructose corn syrup ever. Make sure they never touch it. They will live a completely different life.
It does go a step further than that, though, because if you're breastfeeding a newborn, you have to watch your own intake because you'll introduce the flavoring.
Absolutely. And it's important that mothers eat the way you would want your children to eat.
Well, Chris, we are almost out of time. I would love if you would share with my audience a little bit of information about your own podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Deanna. So I do have a podcast. It's called Healing Conspiracy. You probably are not surprised at this point, but we really like to talk about alternative health, alternative therapies, and I interview people with stories of hope that have overcome the odds, and it's really a powerful, powerful platform. So it's called Healing Conspiracy. It can be heard on KFred Radio every Tuesday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then, of course, I run a podcast as well that can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And I also have a YouTube channel called Healing Conspiracy. And not only do we run the podcast on there, we also have some exclusive content that you can only find on the YouTube channel. So we'd love people to check that out. Also, you can contact me at The Plant Adventure. That's my other brand where I do kind of the nutritional stuff, and I have all kinds of educational things on there and opportunities for people to learn. And, if I can help you in any way, I would love to be a resource. So that's www.theplantadventure.com. And then again, the podcast is called Healing Conspiracy. You can go to healingconspiracy.com as well.
And you will be able to find all of Chris's links in the blog post associated to this episode. Chris, it has been a blast. I am definitely going to have you back on this show. I think you have found a second home with us.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I could help. And, hopefully we covered the things that you were hoping that were heavy on your heart. And, this is a very deep subject. It's something I'm really passionate about, but we just want to see families be healthy again. No matter what that family looks like, whether it's a family that's neurodivergent, whether it's a family who, whatever. I mean, like my family, we live with my illness right now that I'm walking through. I'm in stage 4 cancer. But that's what our lives look like right now. It's not always going to look like that. We're going to, see an end to that soon. And that's great. But everybody is walking out their own journey. But at the same time, I think we can support each other and encourage each other along the way.
I I think one of your popular phrases is it's not about the answers, it's about asking the questions.
That's exactly right. And that's what I have discovered. It's really not about just getting answers, but we've got to know the right questions to ask.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Chris. Everybody, have a glorious and wonderful day, and we'll see you at our next episode of Neurodivergent News here on K-Fred.
You got it.